Throughout Europe's history, there have been queens who ruled and consolidated their authority due to their own abilities. They proved that the pre-established patriarchal system of ascendance to the throne was not the only way of maintaining political power and stability in their kingdoms. One can only think of the Tudor King Henry VIII of England, who struggled to secure the future of his kingdom by constantly chasing wives who could offer him a male heir. It turned out that his daughter Elizabeth was a successful queen monarch in her own right, who would have made King Henry probably proud to have such a legendary successor for the English throne. Here's a list of 5 queens who reigned successfully over their kingdoms in Europe. In a chronological order, we start with Isabella I of Castile. She was Queen of Castile from 1474 and Queen Consort of Aragon from 1479, reigning over the United Kingdoms of Spain jointly with her husband Ferdinand II of Aragon until her death in 1504. Isabella was born on the 22nd of April 1451 in Madrigal de las Altas Torres, Avila. Her parents were John II of Castile and Isabella of Portugal. At the age of 19, Isabella married her second cousin Ferdinand of Aragon on the 19th of October 1469 in the Palacio de los Vivero in the city of Valladolid. Isabella ascended to the throne in 1474 at the age of 23 when she was crowned Queen of Castile after the death of King Henry IV. A bloody civil war for the Castilian throne ensued, but Isabella proved she was able to rule as a powerful ruler on her own during the war with Portugal, managing to secure for herself the throne of Castile. When Ferdinand's father died in 1479, Ferdinand and Isabella became King and Queen of Aragon. The royal couple strengthened and expanded the real power of their kingdoms by stimulating the economy, completing the Reconquista, and consolidating the Catholic faith. As a result, Pope Alexander VI granted them the title of Catholic monarchs. At an economic level, Isabella the Catholic imposed a strict fiscal system of the public finances and encouraged the development of sheep farming and wool trade. During Isabella's rule, Spain became a major European and world power facilitated by Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492. It was sponsored and supported by the Catholic monarchs, leading eventually to the discovery of the New World. After officially withdrawing from governmental affairs on the 14th of September 1504, Isabella died that same year on the 26th of November at the Medina del Campo Royal Palace. Isabella is perceived today as the first Queen of Spain. We shift now the attention to Elizabeth I, who was Queen of England from 1558 until 1603, during a period often called the Elizabethan Age, when England became successful as a major European power in areas such as trade, politics, and the arts. Elizabeth I reigned gloriously for 45 years, securing the establishment of the Church of England. She was born on the 7th of September 1533 at Greenwich Palace near London. Elizabeth was the daughter of the Tudor King Henry VIII and his second wife Anne Boleyn. Elizabeth came to the throne of England when her older half-sister Mary died on the 17th of November 1558. The Queen, who was often called Gloriana, Good Queen Bess, and the Virgin Queen, chose to remain single because she was unwilling to compromise her power. During her triumphant reign, she was able to build a lasting image of female authority emanating from regal magnificence. In politics, she was able to choose her advisors well and was less confrontational than her father. The victory in 1588 against the Spanish Armada made Elizabeth's name forever linked to one of the most well-known military successes in the history of her nation. She died at Richmond Palace on the 24th of March 1603, leaving behind a triumphant reign which brought stability to the Kingdom of England. She was the last monarch of the House of Tudors. The next queen on our list is Maria Theresa, who was an Austrian Archduchess and the only female ruler of the Habsburg dominions, ruling from 1740 until 1780 as Holy Roman Empress. Maria Theresa was born on the 13th of May 1717 at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria. Her father was Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI, and her mother was Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. When Maria was 19, she married Francis Stephen, the oldest surviving son of Leopold, Duke of Lorraine, on the 12th of February 1736 in the Augustinian Church in Vienna. Their wedding followed 2 days later. Maria and Francis had 16 children, amongst them the legendary Marie Antoinette, who was the youngest daughter. When her father died in October 1740, Maria Theresa, who was only 23 years old, succeeded to the Habsburg throne. Maria was accepted as empress by the Austrian duchies and the Netherlands and Bohemia and Hungary, but she encountered opposition from the European powers, which formed a coalition under the leadership of Frederick II, King of Prussia. Becoming Maria's greatest rival for most of her reign, Frederick II invaded and took the affluent Habsburg province of Silesia in the 7-year conflict known as the War of the Austrian Succession. The Hungarians offered Maria their support for the war effort, and during the course of the war, she was able to defend her rule over most of the Habsburg monarchy, apart from the loss of Silesia and some territories in Italy. After the war, Maria Theresa set about further reforming the Habsburg government, focusing on the centralization of the empire's power. Maria Theresa was the absolute sovereign who ruled with the council of her advisors. With their assistance, Maria promulgated institutional, financial, medical and educational reforms. She also promoted trade and the development of agriculture and reorganized Austria's military, all of which strengthened Austria's international prestige. Maria Theresa died on the 29th of November 1780 at Hofburg Palace in Vienna, where she had reigned for 4 decades, leaving behind a solid basis for future generations of the family empire. Looking now to the eastern part of Europe, we find another remarkable queen. Catherine the Great was Empress of all Russia from 1762 until 1796, making her the country's longest ruling female leader. During her reign, Russia became recognized as one of the great powers worldwide, and the country's borders expanded into Central Europe. Catherine was also credited as a political and social reformer who managed to modernize the lives of Russian people by codifying the country's laws. Catherine played a key role in fostering the arts, sciences, and education, and in the process, she became a patron of the arts, presiding over the age of Russian Enlightenment. Catherine's name was also linked to the establishment of the Smolny Institute of Noble Maidens in St. Petersburg, which was the first state-financed higher education institution for women in Europe. Catherine was born in Stettin, Pomerania, Kingdom of Prussia, now Poland, on the 2nd of May 1729 as Princess Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornburg. Her father was Christian August, a German prince of the House of Ascania. Her mother was Johanna Elisabeth of Holstein-Gottorp. When Catherine was 16, she married her second cousin, the future Peter III of Russia, on the 21st of August 1745 in St. Petersburg. Unhappy with her marriage, she became involved with the powerful political groups that opposed her husband. Through reading Tacitus, she understood power politics as they really are. In 1762, Catherine was part of the coup that forced her husband, the Tsar Peter III, to abdicate. On the 17th of July 1762, just 6 months after his accession to the throne, Peter III died. Shortly after, Catherine was crowned empress in September of that year. Catherine the Great's rule, seen as the Golden Age of Russia, lasted until her death on the 17th of November 1796 in St. Petersburg at the age of 67. The last queen on our list is Queen Victoria, who was Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland from 1837 until 1901. One of the longest reigning monarchs in history, she gave her name to an era, the Victorian Age. It was a period of impressive industrial, political, scientific and military progress within the United Kingdom, and was also marked by a great expansion of the British Empire when in 1876 Victoria received the title Empress of India. Victoria was born at Kensington Palace in London on the 24th of May 1819 as Princess Alexandrina of Kent. Her father was Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathern, the fourth son of George III. Her mother was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. After marrying Prince Albert on the 10th of February 1840, Victoria found for herself not only a life companion, but also her closest political advisor until his death in 1861 at the young age of 42. They had 9 children together, who later married into important ruling families of Europe, helping Victoria's dynasty of Europe. She was the last monarch of Britain from the House of Hanover. Queen Victoria died at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight on the 22nd of January 1901 at the age of 81. Her successor was her son, King Edward VII. A strong personality with an astonishing level of energy, who happened to live during one of the most turbulent times in English history, he witnessed events such as the execution of Charles I, the coronation of Charles II, and the restoration of the monarchy to the throne, the Great Plague, and the Great Fire of London. But who was this person? Let's find out. In 1633, Margaret and John Pepys, a couple with a large family living in London, were expecting their 5th child. Samuel was born to this couple of modest origins on the 23rd of February in Salisbury Court, Fleet Street. At the beginning of March, their child Samuel Pepys was baptized at St. Bride's Church. Samuel's school years were spent in Huntington, where he attended grammar school before returning to London to enroll at St. Paul's School for 4 years. On a very cold afternoon, on the 30th of January 1649, Pepys was in the crowd that had gathered at the Palace of Whitehall, where an execution scaffold had been erected in front of the banqueting house for the execution of Charles I, according to his own admission in his diary. He told a friend years later that he was afraid his old school fellow would remember the words Pepys had said the day the king was beheaded, that, were I to preach upon him, my text should be, "The memory of the wicked shall rot." Upon receiving 2 scholarships from his school, he was admitted to Magdalen College in October 1650. After 4 years, he took his Bachelor of Arts degree. Pepys became an assistant and protégé of his cousin Edward Montague, who was elected a Member of Parliament for Huntingdonshire in 1654 for the first Protectorate Parliament. Montague played an important and constant role in Pepys' life, offering him his job and later introduced him to the court of Charles II that made Pepys prosperous. After leaving Cambridge at the age of 22, Pepys met Elizabeth Marchand de Saint-Michel, and on the 1st of December 1655 they married at the church of St. Margaret of Westminster. Beautiful Elizabeth was 7 years younger than Samuel and came from a family of French Huguenot immigrants. In a few months' time, the couple would move to Axe Yard when Pepys obtained a new position working as a clerk for George Downing at the Exchequer Office. His name was later given to Downing Street. Pepys underwent a dangerous operation on the 26th of March 1658 when he was cut of the stone, the removal of bladder stone that was successfully done considering the basic medical procedures, which was incredible for that time. Pepys made of that date an anniversary celebrated by him each year. However, this medical condition would trouble him throughout his life. 1660 proved to be a crucial year in Pepys' life and also in his country's history. When his cousin and Lord Montague resumed his old position as general at sea, Pepys sailed with the fleet, accompanying Montague as his secretary. The political landscape was that of intense activity of bringing back Charles II as king. Montague had been in secretive correspondence with the king, and when Parliament declared Charles II as king on the 8th of May, Montague sailed to Holland to bring Charles back to England. We find out from his diary that Pepys met the king for the first time on the 17th of May, when he described Charles as a sober man. On the 23rd of May, the king came on board, and Pepys described that all day nothing but lords and persons of honour on board, that we were exceeding full. An account given by the king about his escape from Worcester was written down by a tearful Samuel, and so Pepys changed from a Roundhead into a loyal monarchist. Pepys is famous these days for his diary, which he kept for 9 years. In a moment of inspiration, Samuel started keeping a diary, and on the 1st of January 1660 he made his first entry in his diary. His diary, which he never intended to be seen by the public, was made available for posterity in 1825 and offered us a description of London and its people who lived during the middle of the 17th century. He gave us a first account of historical events that marked his native country during that time. Pepys' diary was written in a pleasant style, revealing to us historical events depicted as they happened, as daily occurrences. One gets the sense that history is played out in front of one's eyes. Pepys comes alive through his words. One can see him as he really was, full of energy, ambitious, driven, curious, hard-working, crisscrossing London on foot, by boat and by coach, having dinners with his wife and friends, going to the theatre, playing music, and keeping his diary. Pepys is also remembered today for his involvement in the administration of the Royal Navy, which he helped run more efficiently. He later became Clerk of the Acts of the Navy Board, and he received his official residence in Seething Lane. Pepys started learning mathematics and spent time in the Royal Dockyards trying to understand the inner workings of the Navy. His career would take off, and he later became a Justice of the Peace and in 1665 he became a treasurer for the English colony at Tangier and later a surveyor of naval victualling. The Second Anglo-Dutch War gave Pepys the opportunity to prove himself as an efficient organizer of the navy. However, the war was lost and Pepys was faced with an inquiry in relation with his role as a clerk of the Acts. Pepys had a curious mind and was interested to learn about new things, thus being elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1665. He later served as its president from 1684 to 1686. He had his name printed on the title page of Newton's Principia Mathematica in 1686. Around April 1665, plague arrived in London, and in May, Samuel wrote in his diary that the plague was growing. By June, he saw how the people were frightened by the increased mortality and started leaving the town. By the end of August, Samuel is shocked to see how everybody looks, and discourse in the street is of death and nothing else, and few people going up and down, that a town is like a place distressed and forsaken. At the end of 1665, Pepys wrote in his diary, summarizing his year, "I have never lived so merrily, besides that I never got so much, as I have done this plague time." He was able to overcome adversity and managed to enjoy life and was prosperous, increasing his income during such a terrible time when thousands died because of the Great Plague. Whilst the plague was emptying London of its people, be it by death or by making them leave, one morning in September 1666, Pepys was alerted by his maid about a great fire in the city. Samuel got up and went out into the town to witness the fire for himself, where he could see an infinite great fire which had started in a baker's house in Pudding Lane. London was engulfed by the flames, and the scene was heartbreaking, as Pepys put it. Poor people staying in their houses as long as till the very fire touched them, and then running into boats. Pepys went to Whitehall and informed the king about the fire, and made a suggestion to pull down the houses to stop the fire spreading. On his way back to the house, Pepys walked along Watling Street as well as I could, every creature coming away loaden with goods to save, and here and there sick people carried away in beds. Whilst the fire is raging in the town, Pepys went home and had an extraordinarily good dinner and as merry as at this time we could be. Again, one can see how Pepys the optimist is able to overcome the worst life throws at him. As the fire was extending, Pepys made sure his valuable possessions were secured, and he buried his wine bottles and Parmesan cheese in the garden. Luckily for Sam, his house stood, and he would move back, bringing his belongings. Around June 1668, Samuel's wife, Elizabeth, sat for a picture about 1 year before her death in November 1669, after returning from a trip to France. When Pepys and his wife returned, Elizabeth was taken ill, and Pepys was worried, as he expressed in his letter to his friend John Evelyn on the 2nd of November. In 8 days' time, Elizabeth would be dead. Although unfaithful to Elizabeth throughout their marriage, Sam was clearly saddened by his wife's death. She was only 29 years old. He never remarried, but he lived with a lady maid called Mary Skinner, effectively his wife. Pepys was only halfway through his life and went on to achieve other things, such as being promoted as secretary to the Lord High Admiral and becoming a Member of Parliament for Castle Rising in Norfolk from 1673 until 1678 and Harwich in 1679. Amazingly, he would be forced to resign from the Admiralty, falsely accused of selling naval secrets to the French, and implicated in the popish plot. Subsequently, he was sent to the Tower, but the charges of treason brought against Samuel would be later dropped and be pardoned given his connections with the royal court. Later, he was in Tangier when he took part at the British abandonment of the colony, which gave him the opportunity to keep another journal covering his experiences. When Charles took the navy under his control, Pepys was appointed as his secretary for the affairs of the Admiralty. When Charles II died in 1685, his brother James II became king, and Pepys retained his position as naval secretary until shortly after William and Mary became monarchs following the abdication of James II. He would later be accused of Jacobite activities and imprisoned in 1689. Pepys was approaching the end of his life, and yet he had more obstacles to overcome. He argued against the charges, and he was able to escape. Pepys' love of books made him an avid collector who amassed over 3,000 books and manuscripts in his library. He spent his last years in London organizing his library and holding gatherings with intellectual minds of the time. He later donated his library collection to Cambridge. His health started deteriorating, and he died on the 26th of May, 1703 in Clapham, South London. His wish to be buried next to Elizabeth was respected, and his body was laid in rest in St. Olave's Church. Pepys was regretted when he died, and his friend John Evelyn said, "He was universally beloved, hospitable, generous, learned in many things, skilled in music, a very great cherisher of learned men, of whom he had the conversation." From modest origins, Pepys made his way up to be the secretary of the Admiralty. He advanced his career through skill and his desire to prove he was a good administrator, and left us a detailed account of life in the 17th century London, being forever linked to the city he loved. His attitude to life was a positive one, and he embraced challenges, trying to overcome them, whilst never giving up his desire to enjoy life's good moments.